Emma, thanks for meeting me. I've been thinking a lot about our expansion into the US and need to understand better how hiring works there. We want to bring on a few people, but I'm confused about when to hire full-time employees versus contractors.
Of course, Carlos. It's a common question for companies new to the US. There are significant differences in hiring an employee versus a contractor. What roles are you looking to fill?
We need software engineers for long-term projects, but also some specialists for short-term work, like designers for a specific feature. What's the legal difference between the two types of hires?
Well, in the US, the main difference is how the IRS views them for tax purposes. Employees are on the company's payroll, and you'll need to withhold taxes and provide benefits like healthcare if applicable. Contractors, on the other hand, are considered self-employed. They handle their own taxes, and you just pay them for the work they complete.
That sounds simpler for contractors, right? No taxes or benefits to worry about?
It might seem simpler, but there are strict rules about how you classify someone. The IRS looks at things like how much control you have over their work. If you dictate their schedule, provide tools, and monitor their tasks closely, they might be considered an employee, even if you label them as a contractor.
I see. So if I hire a contractor but treat them like an employee, I could be in trouble?
Exactly. Misclassifying workers can lead to penalties, and you might have to pay back taxes, benefits, and even fines. So it's important to make sure you classify them correctly.
That's good to know. What about compensation? Are contractors generally paid more because they don't get benefits?
Yes, contractors often charge higher hourly rates because they're responsible for their own taxes and benefits. Employees, on the other hand, have more stability with salaries and benefits packages, which can include healthcare, retirement contributions, and paid leave.
Right. And what about hiring someone for a long-term project? Would that make more sense as an employee?
Typically, yes. If you have a long-term need, it's usually better to hire an employee. Contractors are best for short-term, specialized tasks where you don't need as much control over how the work gets done. Think of them as more autonomous.
And what about non-compete agreements or intellectual property? Can I protect our company's interests with contractors as I would with employees?
Good point. You can definitely put protections in place, but with contractors, you need a strong independent contractor agreement that spells out ownership of work, confidentiality, and non-compete clauses. It's just as important with employees, but the agreements might look a bit different.
Got it. And are there any specific legal requirements in the U.S. for contractors compared to Brazil?
Yes, U.S. labor laws are very particular about contractors. As I mentioned, the IRS and Department of Labor have guidelines to determine if someone is a true contractor. You'll also want to make sure you have a clear written contract outlining the scope of work, payment terms, and legal protections.
Sounds like I should be careful about this. One more thing. If we want to hire someone outside the U.S., like from Europe or Asia, does that make a difference?
It can. If they're working remotely from outside the U.S., local employment laws will apply in their country. However, if they're working in the U.S. as contractors or employees, U.S. laws apply. That includes tax, employment status, and visa requirements.
That's a lot to think about. I guess I'll need legal advice before we start hiring.
Definitely. And make sure to review each role carefully to decide if it's better suited for a contractor or an employee. Getting the classification right from the start will save you headaches later on.
Thanks, Emma. You've given me a lot of useful information. I'll make sure to double-check everything before we start.
Anytime, Carlos. Good luck with the expansion.